been working long like a marathon now. Tying up words, making them a bomb now. Tell me, who turned on the alarm now? I got a message when they put it in a song now. I'll see you later, all the haters got it wrong now. We're touching the lightning, we're coming alive, yeah. We're feeling inside, yeah. We got the power. Yeah, come on. We got the power. Yeah, turn it up. We got the power. Come on, is everybody with me? It's time to get together, no more enemies. Throw your hands up, can you feel the energy? Yeah, come on, can you finally hear what this means? 20-something years been chasing down this street, running like a wild man, going since 15. We're touching the lightning, we're coming alive, yeah. We're feeling inside, yeah. We got the power. Yeah, come on. We got the power. Woo. Yeah, get it turned up. We got the power. We're touching the lightning, we're coming alive, yeah. We're feeling inside, yeah. We're feeling inside, yeah. We're touching the lightning, we're coming alive, yeah. We got the power. We got the power. Yeah, let's go now. We got the power. Let's get it. We got the power. Tell me, is this thing on now? I've been working long like a marathon now. Tying up words, making them a bomb now. Tell me, who turned on the alarm now? I got a message when they put it in a song now. I'll see you later, all the haters got it wrong now. We're touching the lightning, we're coming alive, yeah. We're feeling inside, yeah. We got the power. Yeah, come on. We got the power. Yeah, turn it up. We got the power. Come on, is everybody with me? It's time to get together, no more enemies. Throw your hands up, can you feel the energy? Yeah. is this thing on now? I've been working long like a marathon now. Tying up words, making them a bomb now. Tell me, who turned on the alarm now? I got a message, we didn't put it in a song now. I'll see you later, all the haters got it wrong now. We're touching the lightning, we're coming alive, yeah. We're feeling inside, yeah. We got the power. Yeah, come on. We got the power. Yeah, turn it up. We got the power. Come on, is everybody with me? It's time to get together, no more enemies. Throw your hands up, can you feel the energy? Yeah, come on, can you finally hear what this means? 20-something years been chasing down this street, running like a wild man, going since 15. Yeah, we're touching the lightning, we're coming alive, yeah. We're feeling inside, yeah. We got the power. Yeah, come on. We got the power. Woo. Yeah, get it turned up. We got the power. We're touching the lightning, we're coming alive, yeah. We're feeling inside, yeah. We're feeling inside, yeah. We're touching the lightning, we're coming alive, yeah. We got the power. We got the power. Yeah, let's go now. We got the power. Let's get it. We got the power. Tell me, is this thing on now? I've been working long like a marathon now. Tying up words, making them a bomb now. Tell me, who turned on the alarm now? I got a message, we didn't put it in a song now. I'll see you later, all the haters got it wrong now. We're touching the lightning, we're coming alive, yeah. We're feeling inside, yeah. We got the power. Yeah, come on. We got the power. Yeah, turn it up. We got the power. Come on, is everybody with me? It's time to get together, no more enemies. Throw your hands up, can you feel the energy? Yeah, this thing on now? I've been working long like a marathon now. Tying up words, making them a ball now. Tell me, who turned on the alarm now? I got a message when they put it in a song now. I'll see you later, all the haters got it wrong now. We're touching the lightning, we're coming alive, yeah. We're feeling inside, yeah. We got the power. Yeah, come on. We got the power. Yeah, turn it up. We got the power. Come on, is everybody with me? It's time to get together, no more enemies. Throw your hands up, can you feel the energy? Yeah, come on, can you finally hear what this means? 20-something years been chasing down this street, running like a wild man, going since 15. Yeah, we're touching the lightning, we're coming alive, yeah. We're feeling inside, yeah. We got the power. Yeah, come on. We got the power. Woo. Yeah, get it turned up. We got the power. We're touching the lightning, we're coming alive, yeah. We're feeling inside, yeah. We're feeling inside, yeah. We're touching the lightning, we're coming alive, yeah. We got the power. We got the power. Yeah, let's go now. We got the power. Let's get it. We got the power. Tell me, is this thing on now? I've been working long like a marathon now. Tying up words, making them a ball now. Tell me, who turned on the alarm now? I got a message when they put it in a song now. I'll see you later, all the haters got it wrong now. We're touching the lightning, we're coming alive, yeah. We're feeling inside, yeah. We got the power. Yeah, come on. We got the power. Yeah, turn it up. We got the power. Come on, is everybody with me? It's time to get together, no more enemies. Throw your hands up, can you feel the energy? Yeah, come on, can you finally hear what this means? 20-something years been chasing down this street, running like a wild man, going since 15. Yeah, we're touching the lightning, we're coming alive, yeah. We're feeling inside, yeah. We got the power. Yeah, come on. We got the power. Woo. Yeah. been working long like a marathon now. Tying up words, making them a bomb now. Tell me, who turned on the alarm now? I got a message when they put it in a song now. I'll see you later, all the haters got it wrong now. We're touching the lightning, we're coming alive, yeah. We're feeling inside, yeah. We got the power. Yeah, come on. We got the power. Yeah, turn it up. We got the power. Come on, is everybody with me? It's time to get together, no more enemies. Throw your hands up, can you feel the energy? Yeah, come on, can you finally hear what this means? 20-something years been chasing down this street, running like a wild man, going since 15. Yeah, we're touching the lightning, we're coming alive, yeah. We're feeling inside, yeah. We got the power. Yeah, come on. We got the power. Woo. Yeah, get it turned up. We got the power. We're touching the lightning, we're coming alive, yeah. We're feeling inside, yeah. We're feeling inside, yeah. We're touching the lightning, we're coming alive, yeah. We got the power. We got the power. Yeah, let's go now. We got the power. Let's get it. We got the power. Tell me, is this thing on now? I've been working long like a marathon now. Tying up words, making them a bomb now. Tell me, who turned on the alarm now?
Here we go again. Hello everybody. Welcome back to another training session. This is part of the second wave of training sessions. So for some of you, you've come in through quite a few sessions. So my hair looks weird with headphones. For some of you, you come through quite a few sessions. For some of you, this will be your first time. Either way, I'll just run over the basics of everything once again. So my name is Chris Murphy. I handle evangelism in Australia, New Zealand, and Southeast Asia for Unreal Engine. My job is just supporting developers in the region. And we're running this training for the Australian Short Film Challenge. So the role here is to kind of help people be able to get animated shorts up and running. You know, the aim is to bring folks up to speed, especially if they're coming from backgrounds that are not traditionally Unreal Engine. So, you know, we've had a pretty exciting collection of people signing up for this so far, so I'm really excited to see where this all goes. But a little bit of background, there's two other people in on the call right now, it's not just myself. We also have Tony Reed, who is the territory manager, and this entire competition was his brainchild. And then on top of that, we have Alex Stevens, who is a evangelist as well, but he has an engineering background, while I have a technical art background. So Alex is going to be manning the Unreal Engine chat. So while he's kind of, if you have any questions, please bring them up in YouTube. The reason we're doing this as live sessions instead of as just like, yo, we gave you some videos, have fun, was because it was really, really important to us that we actually had a connection back to the community, that we were serving your needs, and that you were able to ask us questions and bring up concerns and anything else in between. So, you know, So the first time in its existence that YouTube chat was actually something that, you know, people wanted. But we really did want those comments. We really did want some feedback to just know what's helping, what's not helping, if there's any specific stuff you would like to see, etc., etc. So please let us know as we go along. It looks like we have a pretty quiet session today. I am going to be using the iPad as a virtual camera at one point in this session. That said, while I will be using the iPad as a camera, this session has a lot more moving parts than everything else that we've run, because the session isn't just about me running things, like building things in Unreal in front of everybody. It also involves live capture from a portable device, which is, in true me style, running on a router that I only put in yesterday. So there are a couple of moving parts that theoretically could stop connecting. Fingers crossed everything goes well, but I'm giving you forewarning just in case things don't go to plan. So here we go, without further ado. It's been summed up as an intimate group of enthusiastic creators. That's a nice positive way to look at this. So let's go. Let's get this running. Today we're going to be working in a session. Here we go. We're going to be working in the environment that was created in the very first interior environments demo. Okay, so this is something that's reasonably bare bones. For anyone that has joined us previously, this is just like a quick environment that was put together. The aim here is for us to have this, but we're going to create a little automatic. We're going to have a robot named Crunch kind of breaking through the roof here and falling down to the ground. We're going to set up a couple of cameras and have just various scenes running. There's a few things going on, but this will be used as our introduction to Sequencer. And Sequencer is Unreal Engine's animation tool. So when we look at Sequencer, I'm actually going to begin, before I create anything in this space, I'm going to give you a quick preview of what a fully fleshed out sequence actually looks like. And that is, if we open up Sequencer, you can see that this is Unreal Engine's way of kind of laying down tracks and actually playing through an animation. Now I'm going to play it properly later, but you can see that we're actually playing shots, we're calling audio, we're playing various animations, etc., etc. So that's what we're going to be kind of tweaking today and working on top of to make sure everyone is comfortable when it comes to actually producing their actual shorts. Okay, so the first of these things is we need to go ahead, and you may think that the opening to this is going to be using Sequencer, but funnily enough, my best advice for starting with Sequencer is, and this is especially true if you're running on a single monitor, the best advice I have for starting Sequencer is to get your screen. This is now the default layout. And let's rearrange everything, because I want to set this up so that we actually have like proper viewports for working with what's in the world. I want to make sure we have as much screen real estate as we possibly can. So I personally like to go content browser, put you up there. I personally like to, for something like this, get the place actors tab and actually dock it over to here, because like I said, I want as much screen real estate as I can possibly get for most of what we're doing. I'm even going to get this world outliner, hide the tab, and it's worth noting that in a perfect world, I would also generally be enabling small toolbars, which gives us reduced size, which gives us more screen space as well. I'm going to keep that on full though, so that everyone tonight can still see everything that's going on. Okay, so like I said, the first thing that you really want to do is set up as much screen real estate as you possibly can, because Sequencer is going to have a large animation track running down the bottom. You know, there's going to be a lot of things that we need to deal with, so it's important that we deal with them with the most streamlined way that we can. Now, one thing that I like to do is when you've set up the layout to how you like it, you can actually go save layout, and you can save it as something that you want to have. Now, I have done this before, and I created one called Sequencer Preview Layout, and I can just click that and it will relaunch. And you'll see that this is basically the same layout, with the only difference being that there's a sequencer window down the bottom. So nothing if not consistent. I can't back that up. You've been to all these sessions. You know they're completely different each time. So let's go ahead and let's get this started. And I'm going to begin by clicking Cinematics. And you see that we have two options under Cinematics. We have Add Level Sequence and Add Master Sequence. Now, there's a difference between these. Master Sequence is something we're gonna fool around with a little bit later, but for the sake of what we have, I'm going to be working with Level Sequence for the time beginning. All right, so I'm going to add a Level Sequence. And I'm going to call this level sequence, it's going to be an intro for Crunch, so I'm going to call it Crunch Intro Sequence, because I'm just real inventive like that. All right, and I'm going to drop this in the root folder. And when I create it, you'll see that we get this sequencer popping up down the bottom, okay? If we want to maximize real estate, again, we can kind of hide that tab. Now, here's how sequencer works. If you have something in your scene, any of its properties that you see in its details here are generally something that is able to be applied to a track. So if I wanted to, I could go ahead and I could look up Crunch, that character that I mentioned before. I was going to use green, but just so that we have something that looks different to the previous sessions, I might go Silver Crunch this time. Yeah, let's do that. So we've got our character here, Crunch, and you can see that I can drag him into the scene, and if I wanted to, I'm now able to just say, hey, add this to sequencer. And I can then just go through and I could apply keyframes. So if you're used to any of these, if you're used to, oh, sorry, I just realized I've got the camera still on, my mistake. So if you're used to any of this stuff, like in other environments, you're probably used to the ability to add keyframes. And that is, I can click here and hit Add Keyframe. And if I wanted to, I could drag Crunch to, say, over here. And I'm just going to add another keyframe at that location. Okay. At which point, Crunch will then move between those locations. Okay. So if we have something in the environment, we're able to kind of just move it around as such. Cool. So let's get this going. What I would actually like to do though is point out that what I just did is probably not the best environment. It's not the best setup to be doing something like this. And that is that. Notice when I added Crunch to the world, if I was to close sequencer, okay, get rid of all of the sequence stuff that's going on, Crunch is still in the world. And depending on what you're doing, there's a good chance that you only want the character, or you only want whatever it is, to exist while the sequence is playing, okay? So what I mean by that is we actually want Crunch to be a sometimes thing. You know, we don't want Crunch always existing in the world, because what if I need to do another scene in which Crunch doesn't exist, you know, or he's in a different place or whatever else? So depending on how you want to shoot this thing, there's a good chance that Crunch isn't actually meant to be there. And that actually brings me to the first thing that I want to bring up, which is called spawnables. And if I select an actor, I can select this option that says Convert to Spawnable. Now what spawnables do is when the scene begins, it creates them, it spawns them in the world, it puts them in there. And watch what happens when I close sequencer this time. No sequencer, no Crunch. Now, because of that, I know that when I fire this up, Crunch just comes into existence. And this is really, really useful because it means that we can like play effects, we can trigger all sorts of cues, and they can be to do with the cinematic. I don't have to just worry about hiding certain things behind walls in the environment or whatever else. I can see that we've had a couple of folks joining us later on. Shout out to TJ, who was one of the Melbourne meetup organizers for Unreal Engine a while ago. I just want to remind everyone that's coming in to please feel free to use the YouTube chat and ask any questions that you may have as we go along, okay? So just bring it up. Now, I brought Crunch in as a spawnable this time, but what I want to show you is a sneaky little method. Watch what happens if I delete that. And this time, if I drag Crunch in, there are two things that I can do that are quite useful. The first is I can select any actor that's coming in, and what I can do is I can hold Control and drag it. Oops, sorry, I want to drag it after the fact. So when I drag it in, if I hold Control when I drop it into the scene, it will actually automatically make crunch added to my sequencer, which is just really useful because whenever you're adding something, it will then apply it. But there's another cool thing, and that is that if instead of holding control when I drag something in, if I hold shift, it will actually create whatever I just dragged in as a spawned actor from the get-go. Okay, and that's really, really useful because it just means that if I'm holding shift whenever I drag in, and this applies to other things too, you know, like if I wanted to add some sort of point light for this shot, as I drag it in, if I hold shift, that point light is now a spawnable that's just been added straight into the shot. Okay, so really, really useful stuff. I wanted to just make sure that folks were aware of that shift key because it saves a lot of time, especially when you're adding just all sorts of stuff all the time. And like I said, you know, having things in the world can sometimes be a little bit dangerous. So I'm gonna delete this point light, but let's keep crunch and let's set up crunch's initial position. So I kind of want crunch falling through this area up here, doing something kind of cool. And then, I don't know, we'll throw in some jets or explosions or something. So we've got crunch. I'm going to put him there. By the way, the little hotkey that I just did is kind of useful. If you hold control and then hold left click, it will actually just grab the x-axis. Notice it's grabbing this thing, but I don't actually have to click on this to move it. I can just hold control and left click. Holding control and right click will do this. And holding control and both clicks will allow you to move them up and down without having to actually select the gizmo manually. So it's just a little bit of a time saver. Again, you know, the more you use the engine, the more just you save 2 seconds here, 3 seconds there, and you do that 30 times a day, and you know eventually you get yourself another coffee break each week. So we've got this character in play, but I'd really like to have Crunch making a bit of an intro, having some animation going here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a quick squiz at some of the animations that I've already imported. Now, one thing I didn't mention about Crunch, but probably should, is that this character is completely free. It's one of the characters available from the Paragon characters that we released. So this was something that existed in a game that Epic had called Paragon. And after the game was sunset, we released all of these assets for free. So let's take a quick look at some of the animations we could use. To increase the size of that, I use the control and then scroll wheel to zoom in. I know I have some sort of cool looking intro, so I thought it was called intro, but it might be called start. There you go. So there's a couple of options here. I'm going to grab level start and take a quick look at it. So this is pretty close to what I want. Crunch kind of falls in. See if there's any other start ones that could look good. Oh, that's actually quite cool. So we have Crunch's hands kind of coming in after the fact, that's pretty good. So we could kind of go that way. I might just go the vanilla one. Yeah, I might do this one just because it's going to be easier for us to blend between multiple animations. So if I was to select this, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to select the animation track for a Crunch. I'm going to click animation, and the one that I want to add is his start animation, level start. And we can see here that when I scrub back and hit spacebar, Crunch is going to fall into the scene and get all ready for battle. Okay? But the thing is Crunch is kind of falling from here right now, which you may recognize as the wrong spot. So I would like Crunch falling from all the way up there. So someone asked, are there any Paragon assets available for Mac? The Paragon assets are available just in the marketplace. So they're just straight U assets and will work on any system that you're using. So with Crunch's animation in place, it's probably a good idea for me to actually have something coming in before this. So what I would like to do is have some sort of other animation playing beforehand that's kind of a bit more of a I'm falling animation. So let's have a quick look at what we have as far as jump, and have a look at maybe pre-land. Pre-land is a very quick animation, but I think getting this one, running it for a little while and fading it in is probably a good option. So if I get that, and once again, I go to animation, I add pre-land, you can now see that we have this. And I'm just going to get that, and I'm going to set its play rate to be something really low. You can see here it's now a pretty long animation because it's just doing that, but I really just wanted something that was generally falling. Now here's the first thing that we can come across that I haven't touched on yet, which is when you get these animations, what you're actually able to do is drag them over the top of another animation, and you'll see we actually get this nice blend going. See that? Now what that means is it will blend from this animation into the other animation straight away. A nice thing here as well for anyone that wants to work on this is you can right click and you can actually choose to have certain blends. So when I grab this here, if I want to look at some other options, I can view the blend itself. Oh, why are you not showing? There we go. So you can either have a manual option here, or alternatively you can go to options and just select one of these yourself. So depending on whether you want a linear blend or something with a bit of ease in, ease out, etc., etc., you would go from there. Someone said, how would we add an animation that might not be from the ones included? So Unreal Engine has a retargeting system built into it, so you could potentially animate something similar and go for it. You could, I think you can export these characters, I'm not 100% sure. Alternatively, you could use Unreal Engine's in-engine rigging tool, which is called Control Rig, which we'll be demonstrating tomorrow. So you can see here, as I said, we're kind of blending between these animations. And what I'd like to do is have a bit of a transform going on so that crunch begins, we want it to end up here, but I don't want crunch to start here. Now there's a nice little option you can turn on before I go any further, which is you can set up auto keying. So if you want to set this up, you can just click on this button over here, and this will actually create a key whenever something changes. And this is really, really useful because it means that if I was to go back to like here, say we're scrubbing all the way back to here, and I get crunch, I can now drag crunch all the way up to here. Oops, sorry. Oh, my mistake. Sorry. Sorry, I want to have key all. There we go. So I'm going to add a transform track. My apologies, folks. Just quickly. No wonder. I added the keyframe to this, and I was like, that's strange. This should be keying in. I didn't select transform. So once you actually have something changed, then you can tell it to work from there. So my mistake. So if I was to move it up now, you can see it automatically added the key that we needed. So I can now pull this up to here, for instance. And one thing that we're seeing a lot of here is the exposure is kicking in and out. So I'm just going to turn off exposure so we don't get eye adaptation kicking in. But if I hit play, we've now got crunch lowering down to the ground. Very, very, very slowly. But that's okay. I'm going to get these and I'm going to pull them across. I'm going to get this keyframe and I'm going to pull it across as well. Still a bit too quick. So I would consider getting this. That should work. Dare I say even a little quicker. That should work. Once you give it a little bit of a kick, or potentially you have slightly more in the blends. That's good. All right, so we'll run with that one. We've now got a nice little opening we can kick into. Wonderful. So the next thing for me to do is, all right, we've got crunch. He's kind of doing his thing. And what I would like to do is, I would like to have some shots set up such that we can actually kind of film what Crunch is doing and set him up. So we're going to think about, you know, where do we want to run this animation from here, and what do we want the rest of this to look like. So I'm going to keep this going. I'm going to push this over to here, just zero out that start frame. Good. I'm going to keep this going. We've got him kind of coming in. The next thing that I would ideally like to do is blend into some sort of idle. And once I've kind of got that core stuff going, I'm going to add an effect to his back. and then finally after the fact, I'm going to, not ability attack. After the fact, I'm going to work on having some camera work. So we'll step through these bit by bit. First thing here is just idle. Idle pose is a single frame. It's definitely not the one that I want. Maybe it's idle combat. Nice. And again, I'm just going to fade into that one. So doing his thing. Okay. So we've got this going on. Just kind of chilling at the end there. I'm going to run this until about here. Great. So with this in place, it's time for me to add a, I'm going to add next up a additive animation, and then I'm going to follow that with a fire effect. So I'm going to go into unlit mode for a second and see his back section here. So there's a cool thing that if we were to look at Crunch's animations, one of them is called thruster panel close. And if you look at what this animation is doing, you can see that it's his thrusters opening and closing. Now, a great thing here is that if I was to drag this in and bring this in as an animation track, it's actually going to play over the top of what I've got there. So it's going to act as an additive animation. Do you see that? Now, what this means here is we can kind of pop this open and close this down. So I'm thinking that Crunch lands, kind of does his thing, at which point I'm going to get this thruster animation, and I'm going to play it twice. Once to open it up, and once to close it. So I'm going to make sure that this first one is actually reversed. Okay, you can now see that that's going to be opening up, and I need some sort of keyframe in here that is the some sort of keyframe that in here that is just the open pose. Oops. So I'm going to drag one of those in. You're correct. Panel loop. That's the one that I wanted. Overlap that a teensy bit. Overlap that a teensy bit. So now we've got this going on. Jet opens up. Jet closes. Okay. Wonderful. So the next thing that I need to have here is that when Crunch's jets open up, I would love to kick off some sort of effect that has like some fire and such kind of coming out. So I'm going to reset my filters, and this time I'm going to have a look for any particle systems that use the word jet. And I can see there's a bunch of these. A more organized version of me would remember which one I want to use, but let's take a quick look. I'd say that's acceptable. So I'm going to get this Crunch cross jets, and again I want to drag this into the scene as a spawnable because I want this to just create the particle system. So I'm going to drag it in, hold shift. Okay, now when I dragged it in and held shift, it's put it there. Now it's worth noting the particle systems don't automatically play. Okay, so we actually, if we wanted this to start playing, I would need to add a track that is a particle toggle track. And if I add that track and then say activate, my jets will activate. Okay? So what I would like to do is I would like to attach this to Crunch's jets. So I'm going to hit spacebar, and I'm going to attach it first and then center it off that. So again, I'm going to go here, add track. I'm going to add an attach track, which is going to be attaching it to Crunch. And I want to attach it to his shoulder jets slot. So this is just a slot that exists on him. You can create your own slots using the skeleton viewer. Now when I call attach, you'll notice this has kind of disappeared. And the reason for that is I need to go to properties and tell it to snap to the target of where it's coming in. And then after I've told it to snap to target, I actually need to go back and just remove any location offsets that it may have that's going on. So we can now see that that's spawned at the correct location. It's at 0, 0. However, it's facing the wrong direction. That's okay. So I need to now point it in the correct direction so that it's kind of coming out this way, and just set everything up accordingly. So the first thing I want to do is if I hit Control tilde, or if I click on this button, it will actually allow me to rotate it relative to its current facing. And I can see that this needs to be rotated 90 degrees this way. And my gut feeling says it's probably 90 degrees this way. And then I just need to offset it accordingly. It's getting closer to what we want. I'm going to turn off my snap grid. Wonderful. So I've now got this so that this will spawn and fire there. And because it's attached, you can see that as the shoulder jets turn around and do their thing, they're correctly rotating. We probably don't want him to burn himself. That's bad. Poor Crunch. So let's go ahead and let's also have under the system here, I'm going to add another keyframe that is to deactivate it. Okay. Now with this going in, the back wall here does not look great. I would love there to be some like fire kind of coming through. So I'm also just really quickly going to slap in another light. Whoops, wrong thing, sorry. Slap in another light. I'm going to grab a point light. And once again, I want this to only exist during the sequence. So I'm going to get my point light and I'm going to drag it in and hold Shift, which has just dropped it into the scene. And I call this Crunch Bright Light. Now, if I wanted to, I could potentially attach this to the particle system, so it's kind of following its lead. It's up to me, but honestly, this probably won't need that. Like we're spawning this, and I'm probably going to be able to just grab what we have here, crank up the intensity, and go with some sort of slightly nicer color. A bit more, everything's on fire. And I only want to do this while the flames are running. So I'm going to scrub back to this keyframe, which is when the jets fire off. And I'm just going to set the intensity keyframes. And drop you to 0. So now we've got this kicking in, okay? Now this is going to kick in, and then we're going to go all the way to this last one, at which point I'm going to say keyframe, and I want this one to be a value of 0. Okay, so we've now got this playing through. Fires up. If we wanted to, this would probably be a good chance for us to add a couple of like just getting this and turning it up a bit, and then maybe grab another one so it kind of goes brighter burn at the start there, and then dials back a little bit. We could also theoretically change the color a little bit from this point on too. So, you know, there's nothing that stops me from adding a color keyframe, going over to here and adding another color keyframe, but this time kind of setting it to something's a bit more on that orange front. And then it cuts out. Okay. Cool. And I'd say that's probably it for the core little stuff that I really wanted to just have for the main thing. So what it's time for me to do is go ahead and add some tracks for it. Now, here's where we get to do some of the cool stuff. So to do this, what I want to do is I want to go to my plugins, and I want to turn a couple of these on. Now I need to make sure that I'm just going to quickly double check all of these because I have a tendency to get these wrong. I need to make sure the following are on. I need to make sure that remote session is enabled. I need to make sure that ARKit is enabled for what I'm about to do. And I need to make sure virtual camera is enabled. Okay, so with those three plugins turned on, we now have the ability to run this with streaming. So check this out. I have to restart the editor first, so I'm just going to click restart now, and we're going to chill for a second and play some elevator music. We're not going to play real elevator music, I made that up. Okay, so just give that just a second to reload. So I've turned on these plugins. There we go. So those plugins are turned on. Why did I do that? I did that because someone said, can you use the virtual camera with Android or is it iOS only? This one's using ARKit, so it is iOS only. You need to have downloaded an application called Unreal Remote. I'm not sure if there is an Android version in the works or not. It's been a little while since I've had a chat to the team, so I can't confirm anything like that at the moment. I'm sorry. So I've got this kind of plugged in, and what I want to do is I'm going to have to set up a couple of other little things too. Okay. Now the first of these is I need to go to my world settings and set the game mode to virtual camera game mode. Okay. Now with that set to virtual camera game mode, I also need to go edit, and I need to go to my project settings, and I'm going to look for something that is called always show touch interface, which just gives me controls on the screen. And here's the cool part. With that set up, if I was to hit play, I'm going to share my screen. So if I've hit play, what we're actually seeing here, actually I'll do it as a shared. Sorry, I'm juggling too many things at once. There we go. So what we're actually seeing here is, as I move my iPad, we're able to kind of direct this and shoot this as we see fit. And what's really, really great about all of this is I can actually set up some really cool little options. So if I actually click performances, I'm able to view any of the sequences that currently exist. Here's why that's cool. If I select Crunch Intro Sequence, which is here, this actually gives me on-screen controls that I can now hit play and see this through. And I can film the whole thing if I want to from this iPad. And on screen, I'm not sure how well you can see that, but I can kind of control everything, right? So what's really great about this is I can actually change a lot of other stuff too. For instance, I can get this screen and I could say to it that I want to change. Let's say I want to. First off, let's say I want to move out of where I am. I can actually use the joypad to kind of actually control myself and move around the environment like this. If I want to as well, I can go through and I can set up some other stuff too. For instance, I can change the camera type. So we're on 35 at the moment, but if I want to change the focal length to say something that's a little bit pulled back, so we'll go like 14, we can kind of sit here instead. The other things too that are quite useful is if I go to the top right, you can see here that we have stabilization. So I can actually decrease the amount of stabilization that's going on, because you can see here that it's currently doing its best to stabilize my movement, and it's stabilizing my rotation. So if I turn them down, it gets a little bit more jittery, but it's actually more representative of what I potentially want. I might add the stabilization a little higher to get something going that's okay. As well as this, we have a bunch of other options that are really useful. For instance, I can axis lock. So if I want to set this Dutch, or at least disable Dutch, you'll notice I can no longer roll my screen. As I roll the screen, everything else is kind of staying put. Of course, I'm going to go Dutch because It'll just look a little bit better on this one. And again, you know, I can lock a bunch of different options here as I see fit. There's quite a lot of stuff you can change here. The other big one here is focus. So if I actually set this to automatic focus, I can choose to focus on what's in the middle of my screen. Alternatively, I can set it up to be tracking specific things, or I can do manual focus and adjust it as I see fit. So there's some pretty useful little options there in terms of like how you want this going. If I want to have, so, and if you want to see the focus plane that's kicking in, you can click this button just here, and that'll show you what it's currently focusing on. We can choose what we want to work and where. Okay. So in this case, what I want to do though is I want to film this character, right? So I'm just going to quickly set this up, and I'm going to take a couple of shots of my boy Crunch here doing his thing. So I'm going to rewind the animation, and I'm going to move all the way over to here, so as I run across the room, we're in a slightly better spot. Alright, so we've got Crunch doing here, so I'm going to take a couple of different camera angles, okay? I'm going to take one, in each time I can just press this red button in the bottom left, and I'm going to take a couple of different camera angles. So if I hit record, it's going to give me 3, 2, hit stop. I think it's probably a good idea for me to move through and go for something that's a little bit lower. So I'm going to do this, pull back to about here, try not to run into anything in my own lounge room. And stop. I'm going to come over here. Something similar. That was a bit too close. I'm going to stop that one. And I'm going to pull myself back. Let's go over to here maybe. Crunch. And once more. Yeah. Should we do it from here? Let's do that again. Cool. Can you pause the animation midway through, set up your camera, and then record the action? Yes, you can. So you can just keep reframing things. And the cool part is Unreal launches in background this little thing over here called Take Recorder. And how Take Recorder works is, I'm going to hit stop. How Take Recorder works is I can say, show me takes, and I can open up any of these takes. And I'm now able to scrub through them. So I can see what took place in each one. And if I click this button, which will lock it, this was one of the worst ones that I took because I was all the way up here and I didn't expect it. But, you know, if I want to open a different one, I could open take 6. You know, so I can work with these as I see fit, which is really, really useful. And, you know, at any point, I'm able to grab some of these things and just copy them between my frames. So this is, you know, something I find really, really powerful, right? Just the ability for us to open this up. Now, it's worth noting that each of these camera tracks is getting laid down as a subscene. So I can see that that is actually putting it there as a subscene that is just the camera track. So in this situation, what I actually want to do is I want to open up the original, and I'm going to use...
Bring your camera.
Oh, sorry. In this situation, I want to go to my crunch intro sequence, but I'm going to add a new track that is a subscene track, which allows me to put sequences inside of it. And I'm actually going to go through and let's have... let's just add a bunch of those scenes. I think my last 3 were probably acceptable. Now you can see that when I added that scene, it's playing the other one over the top of it. And that's because I added the shot instead of the cine camera scene. Let's quickly sync this up. So, see that just there? It's filming everything as we go through. I'm actually going to offset it because I was a bit late. So when this gets to here, I might be a little bit cheeky and put this here. Cool. So I've added one subscene. I'm going to add another one. So we can have that going on. But again, you know, nothing stops me from kind of going back to the subscenes that we had. I think 3 and 4 were probably acceptable. Let's find out. And again, another really useful aspect of what we have going on here is I can also add a camera cut track. So if I add a camera cut track, I can lock it and say the camera that I want to see is the one that's in shot number 5, which is now playing this. 5 was terrible. Let's get rid of you. So this time round. And again, you know, if I wanted to, I could actually just copy these cameras out. So if I was to select this and hit copy, I could potentially copy these out and paste it directly into here. I believe you can. The problem is when I copied this in just before, sorry, when I recorded it, I actually made a mistake when I was recording this, and this is a very easy mistake to make. You need to, when you're setting up your recording settings, make sure that you disable start at current time code, or this is going to record this time code, which is really useful when you're working on a much bigger movie, because you can sync up devices that kicked in at exact times, but it can be a bit frustrating when you're just dealing with just a camera. So I made the mistake there. So we've got this kind of coming in. I'm going to set the camera cut to be following camera cut 4. Pull this all the way back to here. Cool. And if we wanted to, we could switch between these cameras as we saw fit. So I could, as this fires up, I could switch over to a different camera. I could say, hey, I want to start looking at the camera that's number 6. And I think I had one that was over the shoulder. It's probably 3. So I'm just going to add... can you get safe frames to show in viewport? Yeah. So if you want to do that, and that's a great question, you can do so. What I'm going to do is if you go to here and you say cinematic viewport, you can then set to various overlays. You know, I could have a grid or a crosshair or whatever else it is that I need, and as well as that, I can have the action safe, title safe, custom safe, and letterbox. As well as that, you can lock it to certain aspect ratios too. So if you want to set this to a really specific camera, that's totally fine. Cool. Sorry, give me just one moment. I'll find the scenes that were done. This would be a lot easier if I had correctly filmed these, so I made a slight mistake with my takes. That's okay. So quick look. Yeah, 3 was, that's why I stopped it early. Yeah, let's do this one. So this is camera 2. Yeah, so I'm going to cut to camera 2. Oh, wrong button. But the cool thing is you can actually track a lot more than what I showed you. Like if you're doing these recordings, you can also do these recordings straight into, like I could be recording real world actors or mocap straight into the engine, which is again, really, really powerful for this kind of stuff. Switch over to this camera. Cool. And you know, we can tweak with these wherever we need them to be. And that's just changing the shot scenes. Right? So again, pretty useful way to kind of go about doing things. We've now got this. Probably want to do this the other way around, so that we are cutting to you. And then we cut back to the other one. And you know, we can have as much fun with this as we want to. Like it's worth noting there's a bunch of other tracks that we could do that would be a bit of fun. So like when this kicks out, if we wanted to, for instance, kick on slow motion, all I would need to do is just add a time dilation track and say, hey, I was a big fan of The Matrix. And it'll say, no way, me too. So when I play this back, cool. So what I'd like to do now, so now that we've kind of got that that going on, what I'd like to do next is I'm going to add another type of camera. So it's worth noting that, you know, if I do want a freeform camera at any point, I can actually do it. But it's at this point that I would like to actually switch up my development environment a little bit. As I start handling this as like actually moving stuff around the world, I see Jan has kind of come in with a forum post of questions here. It'll be a little tricky to answer all of them at the exact same time, so I guess I'll come back to those questions in a bit. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go to here, and I want to actually set up my viewport to be slightly different, because right now we have this like core single screen, but really what I would like to do is I would like to have two screens that were side by side. So I'm going to go down to layouts and I'm going to select two panes. And I'm going to set this one to be lit and to be perspective. But I'm going to set this to be cinematic. So this means I can still kind of whisk around, but at any point when I scrub through, I've got one that's kind of locked in as my permanent preview. So it's kind of up to you how you want to handle this, but you know, I think this is probably a good move in this situation. So just being able to kind of have both of these set up. So what I would love to do though is I would love to, you know, when we kick off this, we could try a couple of different camera angles. For instance, if I wanted to have something that was literally just here, I can actually select this button that says create a new camera and set it as the current cut. And what this actually did is this created a camera at the exact location of my last selected viewport. And it will allow me to then say, hey, at this point, I want to use camera 56, which is the one I just made. And I'm going to just get this. And if I want to, again, because of how this works, if I want to have transform in different spots, I could say, hey, you know, let's move you around to here. I'm going to tell this to keyframe. Get you in focus. And have another keyframe. It's going to be here. Cool. And I'm going to eject. And that should, yeah, there you go. So we've now got the ability to do that. And if I was to tell this to be the preview, we can kind of kick around between these things. So the other thing that I'd love to show you here was if we wanted to set this up such that we had a camera rig. Let's look at how we go about doing that. So there's a cool thing that's built into Unreal, which is rigs. So if I was to drag in a rig, you can actually see that we have camera rig crane, camera rig rail. And this actually lets us have this lets us actually have kind of like a basic setup of what should happen with like a dolly. So if I was to grab a camera rig rail and drop this in, I'm now able to actually go ahead and kind of set up a path. So if I wanted to have this camera here, I could comfortably get this and just lay out a track. This is a slightly wonky track. It's okay. Let's pull you around to here. Go. There's a bunch of questions there. I'll do my best to come back to a few of them as we go. Cool. So I could set this up as a track, right, and have that in the world. But what's really great about this is if I was to go here, at the moment the track doesn't have a camera. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to spawn it, and then I'm going to add a cine camera, shift dragged into the scene, pop this here, and I'm going to tell my cine camera that I want to, I'm going to tell my cine camera, you can see it's showing over here, that we want to kind of set this up such that we have, by the way, this isn't just iPads, iPhone 10 and above I think does it, maybe before that, I can't recall, but I think there may be some Android equivalents that you can use. You'll need to check the virtual camera plugin documentation, which is here, if anyone wants to suss it out properly. Okay, so what I was going to say is we can add a camera here, and if I want to, I can attach it to the rail. Should be right in front of me. camera rig rail. So I can actually attach this camera to the rail. And what I can do after I attach it, it's all the way back here at the moment. What I can do when I attach it is I can say, once again, you know, hey, when we spawn you, I want you to be, I want you to snap, snap, and snap. And I want to set the 0 at its location. So you can see there it's correctly snapped to it. Cool. So the camera is bleeping into existence. I moved it upwards so that it would be over there. And one of the great things, you know, if you want to set up with this kind of format is you can actually bind a bunch of other stuff. For instance, I can get the camera and I can tell the camera that, like, I want it to, I want to have a look at track, and I want it to look at an actor. And the actor that I want to add is Crunch. I don't know, let's look at his head. Oh, 1 moment. Enable, sorry. Punch in an offset, so it's looking upwards. So that's now actually going to look at crunch. And one of the really great things with like what we've got set up there is that like when we attach this, we can set up all sorts of other stuff too. For instance, I could keyframe, I could go ahead and I could keyframe, where was it that I actually was going to switch over to this camera? Let's switch over to it here. And what we're going to keyframe is the rig. I can keyframe the rig, and the track that I'm going to keyframe is there's like % current position on rail, which is at 0. But when it gets to about here, let's set the current position on rail to 1. And now, so we can actually tell it to kind of follow that dolly that was set up. Have it running on a rail, which is great. You know, it's just super easy for us to kind of get going, and we can do what we need. So having that kind of just general setup, I find to be really, really powerful. Another useful one here to just get going here for the setup is I'm going to go add a track. I'm going to add a fade track. I'm just going to say, hey, when the world starts, be black. Sorry, be black. And I just want you to fade. So now it does its thing. And at the end, I'm going to do the same thing again. Okay. So if we run this back, now again, like I'm coming from a games background, you know, this is not my my space typically. I'm kind of walking you through the tools because I would use them for like game cinematics and such. But hopefully this has still been able to give you an idea of just how some of this stuff is set up. And there's a lot more for me to go into tonight, so I will be kind of stepping through quite a few topics. But hopefully this is kind of giving you at least an idea of how the fundamentals of sequencer goes together. That said, before I kind of step into some of the next stuff, I might answer a couple of questions that have popped up. So someone said, hi, can it be recorded with 2 virtual cameras at the same time, like a multi-camera? You could take that approach with the multi-user collaborative setup, or if you have something that so the virtual camera setup, interestingly enough, doesn't actually have to be with an iPhone. You could be using either VR or you could be using a motion capture setup if you have one at home. So if you wanted to actually have a motion capture setup that was following a stick or something as your camera, you could still just do that if you have the capacity to do so. It depends on what you have in your either your work setting or your home setting. But you know, again, you could have a VR and you could be using an actual camera that's being held in your hands that way. Well, an actual digital camera. It's up to you how you want to kind of generally take that approach. But the multi-user collaborative setup is another good approach where you have things running in multiplayer. And you can have someone running around holding cameras and doing stuff. So if you're able to, it's really wonderful. A couple of other questions. Hides has asked if I could add some camera shake. So if you want to add camera shake, you can just add track, and you add a camera shake track. Where are you? Oh no, it's actually on the camera itself. That's right. So if you select any camera, you can then click add, and there's camera shake. Now there isn't a camera shake in there by default, but if you want to create a camera shake, you can right click, and you can add an animation, I think it is. You can create a camera animation sequence. Oh no, not camera animation, sorry, it's camera shake. It is, it's under MISC. Camera anim. So this is, a camera anim is a camera shake. It's actually using an older system that we're trying to deprecate. So this setup for this is very similar to Sequencer, but a little bit different, and it's on its way out, but I'm not sure what the timing on that looks like. What would make a character slide back to original position when an animation is added? There's a good chance that you're animating your characters with root motion. If you're using the root motion, then they're probably slipping back to where they are. So if that's the case, you would probably want to bring them straight in without their root motion and move them that way. It's worth noting that tomorrow's advanced animation lesson has live link being used, which allows you to kind of bring that straight in. So you could set your root motion to be a transform track instead pretty comfortably. Other questions. How to output an image from a camera to a video card like Blackmagic or Bluefish? Yeah, it's easy. So under plugins, Blackmagic. So you just set up enable a Blackmagic card. They've got some pretty good docs, so I'm not going to go into it tonight since it's pretty specific hardware, but you can just put it out that way. How to output an image from camera to a local network by NDI. I couldn't tell you that off the top of my head. It's not an area that I myself generally work in. Triggering externals from MIDI or OSC or animated logos or anything like that. Again, like we have various input streams that you can use. So you'd be looking through the plugins. There's a few different operators you can use there. Is it possible to connect multiple iPads to UE to control multiple cameras and then produce a TV program in UE with the cameramans holding the iPads? It's a big question. The answer is yes. You could do something like that. You would probably use multi-collab to have each one streaming off of a different thing, because it is worth noting. One thing that I haven't gone into here is it's not running on the iPad. Like I can see it on the iPad, but what's actually happening under the hood is it runs on the computer. It streams its imagery to the iPad. The iPad takes its movements and streams its movements back to the computer. Okay, so the iPad itself is actually just kind of acting as like getting inputs and showing a glorified Twitch stream of what's going on, or YouTube stream. So you know, it's just kind of just grabbing that and kind of moving around. What else was there as far as the questions are going? Can you put a green screen footage in and a camera around it like a Minority Report style flat screen? Yeah, I guess so. Or is that, wait, I'm not sure if you're asking me to do it or if you're asking if it's possible, but I mean, it's possible. Moving on. What else have we got for questions? That looks like it's it for the current ones. A lot of questions there, but that's great. So hopefully that answers this stuff so far. The next things that I want to move into are can we adjust the layout of the app was another question. Yeah, so a really cool thing is this. If I switch over to this, so when I added the virtual camera, you can see it here. Now the really cool thing here is that the virtual camera is totally just done in Blueprint. So if I open up the virtual camera UI, for instance, this is all of the buttons, and nothing stops me from just moving buttons or changing bindings and setting this up to be what I need it to be. So one of the great things there is if you want to, you can actually add entirely new functionality to your own virtual camera setup that might be just a completely like unique to you thing. And this is really, really great because like, look, this is what we gave you out of the box, but like Epic make games and we make tools and we're pretty like when you're using the stuff that you're also developing, I can tell you if there's one thing that teaches you, it's the lesson that like no tool survives first encounter with a developer. And like what happens is it's important for us to have things like this as being accessible to developers to tweak and change. So I mean, like I can look at the blueprint graph and I can examine what any of these buttons are doing. So, you know, if I wanted to example like how the focal length is being updated or the screenshot ability, which I didn't even go into, you can actually place down waypoint markers and take screenshots and stuff like that as well using the camera. So you could do a lot of your virtual scouting with things like that. Like I said, so like, you know, you can examine how any of these functions are working and what logic is going on under the hood. And if you want to change it and add extra functionality and logic, you can do it. Another question's popped up. What would you use to group the camera to something? Say if following with a vehicle, you'd group the car and the camera and him together. Yeah, so this is actually one of the really cool things that we can do conceptually, which isn't hard at all. So when I used Take Recorder before, what it was recording was my camera, right? But one of the things I'll be demonstrating tomorrow? Yeah, tomorrow night is we can actually play games or, you know, pilot these and record all of their movements. So what I mean by that is we could physically create a blueprint a blueprint of a vehicle with cameras, with a base camera setup. At which point what you could do is you could play as the vehicle, record all of its movement, all of its animation, all of its physics, because this is a game engine, right? You can record all of that information using the same take recorder that you saw before. I mean, I could be 47 different vehicles in the same scene, and I could do that by layering them on top of each other. You know, I could be literally just chasing myself over and over, which is kind of bizarre. But what's really cool about that is, like, afterwards, setting up the virtual camera to be attached to one of those vehicles. So let's say we were making some sort of like car chase scene. I could pretty comfortably set my the vehicle as the attachment point for my virtual camera pawn. Pawn in this context refers to something that's playable, a PAWN. So what that means is I could then pretend that I'm sitting on the back of the ute that I was just driving and pretend that I'm kind of getting that chase camera going in real time as well. So, you know, you can set up some really, really exciting stuff here. This is really just like the beginning. I mean, you could even have that car being driven by AI with you on the back, that the car, you know, the AI knows it needs to keep pace with whatever it's chasing. So it's up to you how you want to control some of this stuff, but like the great thing of like Unreal moving into the film and animation space is like there's the capacity to do some really bizarre stuff that only exists because like we were making video games first. So that side of things I think is really important to kind of keep in mind. Cool. Okay, so the next thing for me to kind of step into is we've got this going, everything looks fine and dandy, whatever else. But let's say we wanted to output this. So how do we actually export this? So the old way, ye oldie way of outputting stuff is you can at any point, you can output from sequencer directly. However, I'm not going to be doing that. You just click on here. However, I'm not going to be doing that because there is a slightly nicer way that we roll these days. So you can see here that I can just be like, hey, output me an AVI. And you can choose some kind of some cool formats here as well if you are doing this. So if you wanted to, you could actually set this to output certain buffers if you wanted to. Custom render passes. So if I wanted to, I could actually just output the base color or the depth pass or the whatever else I need. So there is some useful stuff here that may be useful if you are generally looking to use Unreal as a midterm point. So you're using it for halfway through your pipeline and then doing final touches elsewhere. But one thing I wanted to make sure folks were aware of is and this is in beta, but we have a new tool that is called the Movie Render Queue. And if you click on Movie Render Queue, I can just add to render, what was it called? It's called Crunch Intro Sequence. So if you want to export this, I can get a Crunch Intro Sequence and I can say, hey, I want to output this. Now it needs a config, so I just click that and I'm going to say, hey, I want to output something specific. So what kind of output do we want to push out? EXR, BMP, PNG, whatever. I could tell it that, hey, whenever you're doing an output, I want to include a burn-in, or I want to go ultra high resolution, which is really cool because you can actually output, even though you're viewing everything at real time at 1080p, you can still tell it to output some stupid, like crazy high resolution and let it run at less than real time. And we can specify our frame rate. We can have anything else that we need. Just adding settings. So like the high resolution one allows you to say, hey, I want you to run this at 4 times the recorded height, for instance, and set that up accordingly. So like I said, having any of these things kind of plugged in, working, you could enable ray tracing for the sake of outputs. All you need to do at the end of it is just click render local, and this is then going to give you a quick preview of what's going on. All the frames as they get put out. And you go from there. So it's up to you whether you want to use this tool or the old tool for outputting your final renders. That's fine. And again, like if you want to stitch up your EXR footage elsewhere, that's fine. We just request that you don't do any touch-ups beyond that. So, like if you are outputting all of your shots from Unreal, but you want to do the final stitching of everything together, I believe that's still fine, because like the final quality came out of Unreal. It's just like, if you're more comfortable kind of compiling all that footage elsewhere, I believe that's totally within the bounds of the contest. So again, we're kind of playing through this, and this itself will actually output all of these frames. Finalize everything, and then I can just click here, and that's all my shots. Okay, I'm going to delete them because it's going to be pretty big. Great. So, great. That was it for the core rendering stuff. A few extra things that I want to get into, though. So the difference, so someone's asked, what's the difference in quality? So the difference is twofold. So when you use, so it's final pixels from UE, but if you want to, like I believe if you were to stitch together a couple of scenes, I believe that's acceptable outside. So if you've filmed 5 different sequences, you've exported from Unreal. I believe. I mean, Tony, are you on the line at the moment? Are you able to clarify that for me? I know Tony had a call around this time, so he may have had to have briefly dropped out of the call, unfortunately.
I was just about to.
Oh, there you go. So, Tony, is it okay if they're outputting from Unreal, but they end up just sticking the shots together in an external program?
Yeah, I mean, the big thing is going to be building the project. If we ask for the project file, we need to be able to replicate that render. So, I mean, if it can come back into Unreal, all the better.
Yeah. So it's just that's good to know. Okay. So yeah. So to clarify, what that means is basically as long as we can open Unreal, like to check, and we can see that it's the same thing, and that there are no tweaks that have gone on outside of it, then that's within the bounds. So if you're sticking the footage together, That said, you don't. There's a lot. You likely don't have to, and if you want to work within UE the whole way, that's obviously, I mean, better in my eyes. But I believe that it still qualifies for the. I believe that the applications still qualify if you are doing the final. Just renders are being stitched together elsewhere. So you're just putting all those EXR. Now, to answer the actual question that was coming through before, what I was trying to get at was if you go to here and you say to it cinematics and you go to the movie render queue, one of the settings that is an improvement is when you add the high resolution, you're able to actually tell the game to run at like ultra high resolution and then super sample it down to 1080p again. So you could crunch down a 16K image down back to 1080p, which is obviously going to be less than real time, but you'll see it pretty close to that image the whole way through. It's just like at the very end of it, you know, you're able to then have a much higher final output quality if you wanted to. So it's up to you whether you want to take that approach, but that super sampling approach may be a good one for certain kinds of projects. Being asked, could we submit both a sequencer AVI render and a version where we rendered the frames at a high quality and put into a third-party software to stitch together? I mean, yeah, that would be fine. If that's your quickest way of kind of like demonstrating that, then I'm sure that's fine. Yeah, so there are color grading tools in Engine. I mean, it's not going to be the same level as Resolve, I would assume. I haven't used Resolve, but there's some pretty solid ones in there for getting a lot of what you're likely after. And you can use like LUTs and whatnot, so you can do custom shot-by-shot corrections if you want to, and then use the tone mapper inside of Unreal to handle that LUT for that specific shot. So you can still take that approach too. So I'm not sure if Resolve lets you export like LUTs like that. It's not my background, but you can do like. You can get your tone mapping done in Photoshop, for instance, and what you're actually photoshopping is the lookup table, and then you're just exporting that file back to it. We have some more information on using lookup tables if you want. I'm just going to load that up. So there is using LUTs for color tables. So that doc may help some of the folks that have some questions on that front. And you could be switching through LUTs by you're using sequencer to flag different ones or blending between them or whatever it is that you need to potentially do. So hopefully that helps some of the folks that have some questions with regards to their final color grading, depending how you want to take your approach. Cool. So the next thing I feel is important to show people when it comes to the cinematic side of things is before we did level sequence, this time I'm actually going to click add master sequence. Now I'm not going to build this as a master sequence, but rather I just want to show you what it does because there's a good chance you'll end up using this. Now what a master sequence does is if I click this, it actually allows me to set up, hey, I'm making this master sequence. It's got this, the name of it is whatever. But if I click create, so you set up the number of shots and the shot number and your increments and all of that kind of jazz. And if I was to click create master sequence, what it actually creates for me is a sequence that contains other sequences. And if I was to double click on any of them, I could then set up each individual scene to be whatever I wanted. And these could actually be physically changing levels. These could be doing whatever we need to. So a master sequence is likely going to be used by a lot of you for your larger short films, right? Because you're going to have like shot by shot by shot by shot, and then each one itself is a subsequence that you're animating individually. The great thing with doing this is you can then cut these. So I could have a shot here, and I could cut between another shot track like over here. So if I have this shot here, I'm able to select it, and I hit Control/, and I'm able to then like delete this section of the shot. At which point we might be coming back to this part for some reason. So it'll actually grab the state from the other ones and keep running them in background. So it's like it's a useful way of you being able to kind of like switch between these things and set them up. So it's up to you whether you want to take this approach, but I would recommend it as a general conceptual approach, because it will make your life a little bit easier for this kind of stuff, okay? So I've got that one set up. The other thing that I want to show you is a really important thing. So this whole time I've been adding spawnables, right? And I'm sure you've noticed this is getting a little bit unwieldy. Now, all right, you know, if I wanted to, I could still do things. Like I could clean this up a bit by like moving this over to folders and having just a folder that's called cameras. And I can clean that up a little bit. But at the end of the day, this still gets... at the end of the day, this still gets a little bit messy sometimes, right? So another approach you may want to take that's actually really cool is if you go to Window, okay, you go to Window and you select Levels, it'll give you this tab. And what Levels, whoa, not up there. And what Levels lets you do is this. If I want to, I can go to here and I can hit Create New. I'm going to make sure it's empty. And I'm just going to call this, let's say I want to call this demo space underscore lighting. Now the cool thing is it's just brought this level in kind of like a Photoshop layer. And if I double click on this, let's say, I'm going to close sequencer down for a bit. Let's say that you really wanted this shot to look, you know, a very specific way. And for some reason you want to have a bunch of lights that are, I don't know, red, orange, will do. You know, let's say we want to light this up in a very specific way with some moving parts and a bunch of bells and whistles and extra content that might be in there. Give me a second, I'll find some extra content. There we go. Chair. Okay. Putting a chair in the scene. Don't ask why. Okay, so we've now got a bunch of lights and this chair in the scene. But what's cool is if I turn this off, they're not there, right? But what's really useful is if I turn this off, okay, if I turn this off and it's not loaded, but in sequencer, oops, I went to the wrong one. If in sequencer, let's say that for some strange reason when we're doing this opening shot, I can actually add a track that is a level visibility track. And I could say, at this point, I want to add a keyframe. I want to make visible. Sorry, added an extra track. I want to make visible properties. Demo space underscore lighting. And you can now see that that level just bleeps into existence at that exact moment. So what this means is like you could actually have layers and layers and layers kind of stacked on top of one another where Sequence is doing it. Now the advantage of this is I can then just let one person on my team go nuts and set up everything they need to set up in their own custom level. So I could, you know, I could be setting this up as need be. So how does it know to keep Crash in there and not have him disappear? So the question was like, how does he not disappear? Crash is being spawned inside of this. But I mean, like, I could tell this at the same time as bringing in demo space lighting. I could also bring in a bunch of extras as well, you know? So I could actually bring in lighting and effects. And I could have this on a shot-by-shot basis, or I could house them in sub-sequences. Yeah, it's really up to you how you want to approach it. The big advantage to doing it with levels for some stuff is that you can work with the conventional workflow of setting up the environment. But I mean, this says underscore lighting, but there's no reason that this isn't demo space underscore 2 weeks later when they cleaned this whole place up and it no longer says Trev was here on the wall. You know what I mean? So you could be bringing in different versions of the same space with different scene changes or environmental changes or whatever else it is that you need to have. Some of it could be driven by sequencer, some of it could be driven by streaming levels. There's like a bunch of different ways to do the same thing, but this will hopefully help you figure out what's the right way to approach this for your team and for your developers, and what's going to make them the most comfortable. And again, you know, the Australian team are all here to help you out. So if you have any questions about workflow and how you want to approach this thing, whether it's before you pitch or after, if you want to have a chat about some stuff, please let us know, and we'll do our best to answer some of these questions about, you know, what's a good workflow for this type of thing, what concerns are you having, blah blah blah, and you know, happy to kind of step through some of that stuff. So the last of the core feature sets that I really wanted to step through is I wanted to go here. I'm going to open up their project because it's way better than mine. Is if we look at the sequencer that plays for this level, so I'll lock you in as cinematic cameras, good, and I'll lock this shot rack. So we can see that this is playing through. This is the final thing, by the way.
You want to play?
Okay.
So you know, that shot is, and you can, by the way, this project is publicly accessible. You can grab this from the Learn tab of the engine, so you can download the sequencer demo and rip this apart as you see fit. One thing I want to note though is this was done before some of the newer tools existed. So there's a couple of cool things that aren't in this that I just want to make sure you're aware you can do. So the first of these is this. Let's say we've got this. Let's say we've got this shot here, okay, of this dude walking in looking all cool. But someone says, hey, I really wish he didn't look like this, or I want the camera to do something different. Cool thing you can do is you can actually right click, and in the same way that I was doing multiple takes before using the take recorder, I can actually right click and hit new take, okay? And when I hit new take, I'm now able to open this up. And let's say we want to change the, say we want to change the camera. So I'm just going to lock into it, and I'm going to bring the camera over to here for some reason. So it now does that, okay? Now the cool part of this is, actually, you know, I might change this a little bit as well. I might also add a random light, since let's pretend that we wanted to have slightly different lighting for this shot to make this character look a little bit more interesting. So point light. Again, I hold shift. With this point light over here. And now, because I'm going all in on it, I'm going to set this up to be. Okay. So we've got our what was the camera to lock in? Oh yeah, so if you want to make something pilotable, all you need to do is click on this little camera, and that will now be in control of this screen. So as I move this screen around, I can keyframe it to that exact location. Okay, so we've got that taken in. We can now see that we have a different shot that, all right, it's not great, but should do the trick. I'm gonna move you back to here because now I feel embarrassed about it. Okay, cool, great. So now that we've got this shot, here's the fun part. If I go back to the master sequence and I'm looking at this, I'm actually able to right click and say, all right, show me take 1. Show me take 2. Show me take 1. So I can actually play this back with different setups, and I can try a bunch of different things in a non-destructive way. which allows me to kind of take a way more hands-on approach with certain things. I mean, like one of the main things that's lovely in a real-time environment is just happy accidents, right? Like you can actually try stuff and see what the final result is going to look like without spending a week rendering out the entire thing. So being able to just do something and be like, oh, it's pretty good, and then be like, all right, what if I just mess everything up and try a bunch of different shots? Let's try this out. Let's put this here. Let's bring in an extra character or explosion or change things around. You can change whatever you want and do it as different takes. And because of that, you're going to be in a slightly better position, I think. So, try and maximize your usage of a real-time engine. Try and get the most out of that. So I think that was it for the core stuff that I really wanted to shoot through. Again, please look at this demo. It's worth noting that it doesn't use spawnables. Everything's already in the scene. So, there's things like that are kind of missing, I think, because of when it was made. But hopefully... can you add extra shots after the Mac? Yeah, you can definitely add master shots. I mean, it's worth noting that a master sequence is actually just a regular sequence that comes bundled with shot tracks and audio tracks, and not audio. It comes bundled with a shot track that's automatically split into X number of scenes and X number of shots. You know what I mean? It's a starting point that just gives you a really clear, easy spot to work from that doesn't involve you having to duplicate 47 different initial sequences. And that's why when I was setting it up, if you go add master sequence, you actually can set up things like what properties do you want in there by default. You can set up roughly how long is every shot. You can set up what the rules are for when you do more takes and that kind of stuff. Master sequences are just made to make your life a lot easier and skip some of those early steps. So to this point, that we're kind of through the core content of what I wanted to run through. So I'm gonna bring Alex into the fold, and we'll answer any additional questions that may have popped up throughout the course of this. Unfortunately, no Tony tonight because we've had a bit of a timetable clash with some other stuff. So you'll all have to make do with us, and I have to turn my camera on. All right. So thanks everybody tonight. I hope this was useful. For any of the people that came in a little bit later, this is Alex. Alex is a evangelist, much like me, except his focus is more on the engineering side of things. So when you've got an issue with the tools that are in Unreal, that's often something that I generally have an idea about. When you have questions about some of the inner workings of how those tools even work beyond the phrase of "it might be magic," or some reference that uses the word gbuffer, then I'm going to kick it over to Alex as well. It kind of starts to fall into his domain too. So
definitely good at me do art stuff.
Yeah, we have. So hopefully having the two of us here on a technical side can kind of answer any additional questions that pop up. Unfortunately, I want to be very clear that both of us come from games backgrounds, and because we come from games backgrounds, there's a lot of stuff we can answer because it's really just a real-time background. But some of the final points for some potential cinema questions, I'm not gonna lie, I get a little bit intimidated every now and then, and I'm like, that is not in my ballpark. So we'll do our best. So if anyone has any additional questions to throw out there, now's the time.
So I guess Creative Frame asked, does Composure have a solver for matching media plates?
Sorry, what was that, Alex?
So does Composure have a solver to match media
matching media plates?
I'm
not too sure, but it's worth noting that if you have another solution, such as in Maya, for kind of matching some of those plates, because I can't recall if Unreal has that out of the box or not, but if you want to bring it in from anything else, or even when you're recording the stuff, you're tracking down that translation. You can use LiveLink to just bring that track straight in. You can bring in external camera tracks from Maya. You can literally just import the camera tracks directly. So if you have any other solver, you generally have some way to bring it in from those tool sets. I'm not aware off the top of my head of whether we have a tool for that for handling the composition in UE. So hopefully that still helps. TJ has asked a question that is, can you still make it even if you don't get selected for funding? I'm not too sure what the rules are on that. gut says no, but I'll tell you what. Let's if you can follow up with me afterwards, I can ask because Tony's going to have the best idea of what the rules are around that. For the time being, my assumption would be no because of how the program is being run, but I can't guarantee it because it's outside of my wheelhouse. Unfortunately, you've picked the one night that Tony wasn't here for his Q&A, so I'm sorry I can't answer that. I can't answer that question properly myself. How would one go about binding the manual focus value to a game controller? Actually, that's super easy. So in Unreal, we have the ability to just bind inputs. So in the same way that you can bind W, A, S, and D to be like moving around and strafing, you could comfortably just bind another key to be your focus. So it grabs the current camera and it dials in the focus where necessary. So if you wanted to bind that to a game controller, say the left or the right analog stick or something like that, that's actually super quick to do. And if you come to the Intro to Blueprints class tomorrow, you'll see a general idea of how to set up bindings that you could potentially be working with. Can you swap back and forth between sequencer and master after changes? I'm assuming you mean like after you've changed something in the master? Yeah, I mean at any point you can kind of drop into those and pull back as necessary. So if that's my understanding of your question, so you can jump into the sequence, do a bunch of stuff, and then in the master be like, no, I'm going to stick it over here, or I'm going to cut this, what was originally one sequence, I'm going to cut it and do the first half of it here and the second half of it here, because it turns out this shot's going to be best split up into two different spots. You know, like you can still comfortably do that kind of stuff. Cool. All right. Yeah, marketplace content is fine to use. Quixel content is fine to use. You know, I mean, anything that you've got the rights for that's, you know, you're not bringing in a Star War or something, then, you know, it's up to you how you handle it. But, you know, just making sure that you've got copyright acceptable stuff and that it's coming from reasonable spots. We had a third person involved on that one. Sorry, I've lost my complete train of thought after Debbie walked in. Yeah, so as long as the material is acceptable, it's all fine. And you're willing to go with that. How to do credits. So Unreal's got a built-in UI tool. Plus you can use the burn-in tools as well. Burn-in actually lets you say which UI thing do you want to have popping up. That's how you want to handle it. But I would probably just handle it using our in-engine widget tool, which allows you to just type them out. It's pretty straightforward. It's
in editor scripting session. I actually go over a little bit of our UI tool.
Yeah.
So check that out. I think that's on Friday. Is it? I think so. Friday.
No, isn't that part of your intro to Blueprint? Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's tomorrow.
Tomorrow night.
Yeah, tomorrow night.
Right.
Yeah, we know what's happening. We're professionals. We have a timetable. Yeah, so tomorrow night, Alex will be covering something along those lines. It may be a good idea for us to actually throw credits on something tomorrow night while we're at it when you jump into UMG. That's actually a really great point. So we'll look at switching that one up. Is that the same as the title? Are there title requirements? I don't think we have title requirements. You may need to check with your agencies, but I doubt that's the case. There's obviously going to be credit requirements, but there's probably no intro title requirement to my knowledge. If there is, I'll try and make sure that it's well known to anyone that's going into the comp. Unfortunately, all the overview questions that are General Tony's wheelhouse are a little bit tricky tonight. I mean, the main reason for a title that I'd put in there is it's easier to remember and discuss which project was which when you're in a big round table of people talking about all the final applicants, you know. I don't think there are specific requirements for the intro titles. Yeah, so there's things like FilmVic requirements to have their splash screen at the end of it. So yeah, there are the credit requirements, but I'm not sure about anything in the opening of a short. Any chance of getting an advanced copy of 426? I mean, I think it's been branched at this point, so you could probably pull it down from GitHub. But it's not going to be stable, so it's up to you whether you want to risk it or not. And it's up to you whether you want to take that approach. If your project was based around like constant changing times of day with like outdoor environments with like pretty oceans and that kind of jazz, then 2.6 may be a good move, but it's up to you really. I mean, I would probably give it a bit of time before you leap into something like that to allow the build to kind of stabilize a bit. That would probably be your safest move, but I can't give you an exact timeline on it. I'm sorry, Luke. Can you use my likeness as a character? Now I'm starting to get concerned. Cool. Can we add something like scanline effects or cell shading to the render? That's a really great question. Yeah, I mean, you definitely can. In the post-process, you actually can, in the post-process that I showed you before, I know I was dialing things in, but one of the really cool things you can do is you can actually push the current image into a material and then work with that as you want. So you can do outline effects, you can do Kuwahara effects, you can do like all sorts of weird and wonderful crazy stuff as a post-process in Unreal that still gets output through Sequencer at really high quality. So that's actually a really great question. And, you know, like I would love to see some stylized projects myself. I'm not one of the judges, so, you know, take that with a grain of salt. But, you know, I would love to see some stylized projects. You know, there are plenty of people who have made some really, really incredible stuff in UE that if you were to look at, you would think was closer to traditional animation, you know. Just because I'm showing you how to do stuff realistically doesn't mean that's necessarily how it has to come out. So it's up to you if you want to approach something like that. And if so, feel free to ping me, and I'm more than happy to link... I'm more than happy to link some potential resources and similar projects that have that like stylized feel to them. That may be useful, so please let us know.
We officially had a scanline tutorial as well for the post-process docs, and I'm trying to look for it.
It's under the post-process materials doc.
Yeah, it's coming up as blank for me. That makes me wonder if the doc site is warped a bit. But yeah.
Right. No, it's on mine. Here it is. It's right here. There we go.
Ah, cool.
So since I'm sharing screen, I'll just bring this across. So if you see my screen here, so this, you can actually run a material which allows you to just set up these kind of effects. It allows you to set up all sorts of weird and wonderful things, because how it works is like you can say, hey, take the image, and you can choose which of the buffers you want to grab. So you could be grabbing like the current unlit version of the scene and doing something with it, and then, you know, mixing stuff up again. But how you want to handle this stuff allows you to create all sorts of kind of crazy, weird, wonderful effects. So in this case, like how to handle like outline effects and things like that. So it's worth looking into, which is post-process materials. Now that you've mentioned that, I might try and squeeze that into the tech art session on Friday. For export, some of the key things we can or should do to improve the image quality of the final render, like increasing sampling and whatnot. So for export, it'll be increasing your sample size. Obviously, if you can run ray tracing, there's a lot of projects that would benefit from that. Truth be told, there's a lot of projects that wouldn't really see much of a change, but if you want to get like, if you've got something that's in a very metal, shiny environment, having gorgeous reflections is going to make everyone happy, right? So that's definitely one. Super sampling is another. You can tell the exporter to force LOD 0 of everything, so it forces everything to be its highest quality. It never drops back to a lower quality distant version when you're doing the final output. That could be really beneficial too. Potentially using virtual textures. So one thing I haven't covered in my sessions, but you may want to, is you can run ultra high resolution textures using Unreal. So I showed runtime virtual textures in the session earlier today, which allows us to create those textures as the game runs. But you can use regular virtual textures to stream like 8K textures onto everything reasonably efficiently. Or not everything, but the important parts of your scene to get like a really high quality mark. That kind of stuff can go a long way for certain types of aesthetics that you may be going for. And I think there's a couple of breakdowns on using that. So again, if you are coming from like a film background, that's kind of allowing you to kind of work with that. I think it's called UDIM setups. So that may be a slightly better approach for some people who are kind of used to that general workflow. You can find more information on it in our streaming virtual textures docs, which is this. Cool. Okay. Okay, I'd say that about covers it. Hopefully this session was useful. Like I said, it was going to be a crash course. It was really just a primer to just showing you how some of the core stuff works and how to set things up. By all means, please check out the Learn sample that we have, the sequencer sample. It is really useful. If you have any questions, please reach out to us and let us know like anything you're looking for, anything you're concerned about. I mean, and the other thing is as well is, you know, if you're like, hey, how would I even begin to start looking at doing this kind of effect or something like that? By all means, let's start that conversation, because like our job is to help you along the way. We want to see the best possible thing coming out of the competition, and the any way that we can really support that, short of actually making it, then please let us know. But yeah, thank you very much for your time. It's really lovely to see a lot of folks joining in. Keep seeing certain names popping up in the chat again and again. Have a good evening, everybody. Take care.
Thanks, folks.
Tell me, is this thing on now? I've been working long like a marathon now. Tying up words, making them a bomb now. Tell me, who turned on the alarm now? I got a message when they put it in a song now. I'll see you later, all the haters got it wrong now. We're touching the lightning, we're coming alive, yeah. We feel it inside, yeah. We got the power. Yeah, come on. We got the power. Yeah, turn it up. We got the power. Come on, is everybody with me? It's time to get together, no more enemies. Throw your hands up, can you feel the energy? Yeah, come on, can you finally hear what this means? 20-something years been chasing down this street, running like a wild man, going since 15. Yeah, we're touching the lightning, we're coming alive, yeah. We're feeling inside, yeah. We got the power. Yeah, come on. We got the power. Woo. Yeah, get it turned up. We got the power. We're touching the lightning, we're coming alive, yeah. We feel it inside, yeah. We feel it inside, yeah. We're touching the lightning, we're coming alive, yeah. We got the power. We got the power. Yeah, let's go now. We got the power. Let's get it. We got the power. Tell me, is this thing on now? I've been working long like a marathon now. Tying up words, making them a bomb now. Tell me, who turned on the alarm now? I got a message